Pag ang bansag sa'yo, Mr. Disaster, dalawa lang naman ang pwedeng dahilan. Either malas ka, or like Cedric Daep, matindi ka.
Dapat, pagdating sa investment, do more investments on pre-disaster activity rather than response and recovery. Because if you do a lot of preparedness and prevention work, then you will have less on response and recovery.
Cedric Daep used to call himself the #1 critic of government. But he's a local government officer himself. He heads the Public Safety and Emergency Management Office for the entire province of Albay in the Bicol region. And in a country regularly devastated by everything from typhoons and floods to volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, Albay is not only notorious for having all of these. Sikat ang probinsya for its successful, self-explanatory program, Zero Casualties. And in that program, Mr. Daep is at the center of it all. Like any natural force, he says, his being in public service was not planned.
I never tried to join the government except during that time when I was asked, if you want, the government must serve the community. And kung may mga expectation sa government, why don't you join the government and do what you must expect that the government must do? Ayun, doon ako na-inspire.
Laking Manito, isang 4th-class municipality sa Albay, Mr. Daep took up agricultural education in college, nagmaster sa business administration, at ang thesis niya, the economic effects of disasters on his home province. But Mr. Daep was already a management consultant in Makati in the 1980s when he found himself lured back to Albay. The province's most iconic volcano, Mount Mayon, erupted, and Mr. Daep helped in relocation efforts for communities displaced. Over the next 3 decades, he continued to study natural hazards. Building on meteorology classes in college, where the Tayabas weather station in Quezon became his lab, he took volcanology units in Japan with support from PHIVOLCS, or the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology. He learned about earthquakes in China, and learned more after the 2013 quake in Bohol. In Australia's Macquarie River, he learned about flood management. And with every typhoon, volcanic eruption, and flooding event in Albay, his knowledge grew. Today in Albay Bicol and in many cities and provinces that have come to ask, is zero casualty for real? He is Mr. Disaster. I'm Trisha Aquino reporting for Alagang Handa, a special series of Teka Teka News. Every week until February, we're dropping episodes exploring the link between animal welfare and our own well-being during disasters. In the last episode, we visited Batangas, where we talked to government and volunteer vets about what it took to respond to the Taal volcano eruption in 2020. We also learned about a legislation that animal welfare groups are pushing to ensure the inclusion of animals in disaster preparedness and response. Alagang Handa is produced with support from Internews' Earth Journalism Network. Mr. Daep is more than just the boss of the Albay Public Safety and Emergency Management Office. He helped draft the policy that would create the APSEMO in 1994. In 2010, it became the basis for RA 10121, or the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, and Albay's program became the model after which disaster reduction and management offices were replicated all over the country. The main question people ask Albay is, how did you do it? With every disaster, typhoon, or eruption, halimbawa, the province stands out for a low casualty count. Mr. Disaster says the first thing to actually remember is that it is not about any one person's leadership, but rather about building sustainable systems and institutions, like his office, the APSEMO.
Kasi dati, council lang. Kung council, we will convene all the different agencies during emergency. And after the emergency, wala nang recovery kasi back to mother unit na. But with that creation of that office, na-apply yung disaster risk reduction and management cycle. Dahil meron ng opisina na nagpapatakbo ng disaster.
Kahit walang bagyo o hindi nag-aalboroto ang Mayon, may ginagawa ang opisinang ito.
Governance dapat institution, policy, and budget. You cannot separate one of it to one another.
Mr. Daep likens it to a choir or an orchestra.
Dapat well-organized ang institution mo with defined personnel with specific job description. Para pag if they do and be focused on the specific job description, pag sinabay-sabay mo yan, maganda ang performance kasi walang duplication. So, parang music na may blending. Pag pinagsama-sama mo yung mga tono, ang ganda ng harmony.
But people need a score. They need something they can follow.
And then, number 2, yung policy. Because ang basis mo for decision making must be policy. Otherwise, pag di ka sumunod sa policy for your decision making at based naman sa opinion mo, magkakamali ka dyan, pwede ka magkasuhan. To be consistent with the legal basis for everything that you must do. And then, syempre, budget. You must stick to the available appropriation you have. Kung kulang ka ng budget for but you have a lot of things to do, we make a proposal and then submit it to external financial institutions or funding agencies in the form of grant so that we can do a lot of more projects coming from external sources.
Mr. Daep says once everything is in place, it's important to be guided not only by explicit principles, such as the wisdom that prevention is better than cure, but also by very simple measuring sticks for success.
Our priority is life, and during the time of emergency, we count on the number of victims, not the number of voters. Wala pang mamamatay.
Crucially for Albay, one lesson that they learned is that the casualty count they monitor should include animals. Livestock loss should not just be counted as property damage, but as a real yardstick for lives lost or rendered vulnerable. And animals, too, are covered by Albay's mantra that emphasizes preparation and prevention over relocation and rescue. Listen to Dr. Pancho Melia. He works with Mr. Daep as Albay's provincial veterinarian.
Pag alert level 0 po kasi, ibig sabihin no activity po ang vulkan. Pero hindi po kami, wala pong action. So meron po kami dapat dyan ng mga veterinary intervention. So kahit po walang alert level, 0 po kami, ay nagkakandak po kami ng mga veterinary medical mission.
Dr. Melia says animal security and welfare is critical to disaster management before, during, and after actual calamities. Not only are livestock inextricable from the lives of Albay's agricultural workforce, but they are also critical to recovery.
So ang aming opisina po ay talagang ang pinaka-main task ko ay una po para po sa makasiguro po kami ng food security. Kasi po ang veterinary office po ay primarily po ay kami po ang nagbibigay po ng protina sa hapagkainan po ng mga albayano. No, ibig sabihin, kami po ang nagpo-produce ng karne, ng itlog at ang gatas. So yun po ang aming gusto naming makasiguro na walang magugutom na albayano.
When the alerts come in Albay, therefore, the veterinary units have their own protocols that kick in.
So, meron na po kaming ginagawa po dyan pag alert level 1. Una po ay nagkakaroon na po ng activation ng Incident Command Center. Ito po yung aming Provincial Mayon Eruption Animal Evacuation Team. Continuous pa rin po ang aming coordination sa mga city and municipal LGUs. Then, nag-i-start na rin po kami mag-identify at mag-designate po ng mga pick-up zones. Kasi kung bigla pong pumutok ang bulkan, alam po namin kung saan sila pupunin, yung mga hayop. So, kapag alert level 2 naman po, ang interpretation po ng VBOX, ito po ay alarming condition. So, dito po, nag-i-start na po kaming mag-isip ng aming mga stocks, yung aming mga supplies na gagamitin. Mas close po ang coordination namin ngayon sa mga city and municipal LGUs. Kapag alert level 3, ito na po, ang status po ay critical na po ito. Ibig sabihin, sabi po ng VBOX, meron na pong crater glow, meron na pong increased bulging of volcanic edifice, saka may mga minor explosions na pong nangyayari. Ini-inform na po namin ang mga owners ng hayop na nasa loob po ng 6 kilometer permanent danger zone ng mandatory evacuation. Kung ililikas na po namin yung mga hayop. Tapos po, pag alert level 4, ito po yung mas grabe. So, ang nangyayari po nito, meron na pong eruption talaga nangyayari sa Mayon Volcano. So, meron na pong lava fountaining, may mga lava flow na po siya, at may mga ash explosion.
A number of things are already in place, like an allocation to rent hauling vehicles, the identification of escape routes. Albay has no less than 20 pooling sites outside the danger zone where animals will be taken.
Pag dumating na po yung animal, meron na po kaming tagging, sinasabayan na po namin yan ng mga veterinary intervention, may mga vitamina na po kami nilalagay dyan, at identification, number 1, yung recording. Binibigyan po namin sila individual ng lubid na libre. Kasi po para isurrender po namin, dapat po nakatali po sila.
Ear tagging assigns a number to the animal, which then corresponds to the document its owner holds. Walang nakawan, which is a real concern among farmers, at hindi magkakapalit-palit ng mga hayop kapag bumalik na sa normal ang buhay. At tulad ng sinabi ni Mr. Daep tungkol sa kahalagahan ng paghahanda, lahat ng ito ay ilang taon nang plinano. Sa tulong ng Food and Agriculture Organization ng UN, nabuo ng Albay, Batangas, at pati na rin ng ibang mga government units ng Indonesia, kung saan marami ring bulkan, ang mga contingency plans nila noong 2022. National agencies also had a hand in putting these plans together.
I am Dr. Maricela G. Ordinario. I am a veterinarian 3 at the Animal Health and Welfare Division of the Bureau of Animal Industry.
This is Dr. Anthony Bupad, currently the head of the Animal Disease Control Section under the Animal Health and Welfare Division. So, Doc Sheng and I belongs to the same unit. Ang assignment niya is animal welfare primarily, and then sa akin yung animal disease control. And concurrently, we are also involved with DRM of BAI.
No days are the same for Doc Sheng and Doc Bong.
Before I joined the Bureau, ang iniisip ko kasi na government work is desk job, 8 to 5.
Ang mandate kasi ng Bureau of Animal Industry is to promote livestock production, animal health, of course, animal welfare, and then develop policies and implement programs related to them. Tapos yung, of course, yung sa mismong division namin is primarily concerned on animal health and disease control programs.
Relative dun sa hawak ko na section, kalahati na may regulatory function. So dun pumapasok yung task ko na nag-i-inspect or nagbi-visit ng mga facilities. The other half is the policy making. For example, yung disaster preparedness, disaster risk reduction and management. So we do create policies, issuances na para sa benefit ng ating stakeholders.
BAI itself has its own roles during calamities.
We are receiving alerts from PhilVox, from NDRMC. Also, we monitor sa news if there's an impending disaster that is more or less to occur. Minomonitor na namin yon. Immediately, we coordinate with our counterparts. We also coordinate sa mga regional field office ng DA. Tatanungin namin kumusta dyan, anong mga pangangailangan, anong mga posibleng kakailanganin para ano man ang mayroon sa BAI na pwede naming mai-provide, mapapadala namin or kami mismo ang magdadala, especially if yun nga kung may pangangailangan sa additional na personnel. Minsan may mga groups, organizations that would reach out to us, especially mga animal welfare groups that would express their intent of providing support. Yung last na major eruption ng Taal noong 2020, the Department of Agriculture organized yung LEOC or the Livestock Emergency Operation Center. So, yun ay ginawa ng Department of Agriculture requesting yung mga attached agencies to provide any and all possible resources, vehicles, manpower, supplies, para tumulong. So, like ang BAI, yung farm namin sa Nueva Ecija, meron kaming truck na malaki na pwedeng kargahan ng livestock, ng cattle. Pinaluwas namin papuntang Batangas.
Pero kahit all hands on deck sila tuwing may sakuna, marami pa ring kulang.
Siyempre, ang gusto natin mag-create ng makapag-institutionalize ng unit na ang specific task is just para sa disaster risk reduction and management. So, syempre, yung ating disaster preparedness, tapos para merong team for the preparedness, merong team na magiging in charge for rehabilitation or yung mismong team na i-deploy sa ground to assist.
When you say rehab, what does that mean po?
Kapag post-disaster, so kung halimbawang kailangan ng assistance ng farmers natin on rebuilding yung population ng animals nila, or kung kailangan ng assistance para ayusin yung, halimbawa, the facility. So kung paano nila i-rebuild yung kanilang livelihood post-disaster.
At pareho rin ito sa hinihiling ng mga bakwit ng Albay. Kinausap ko si April Meyer Manjares, isang reporter na isang dekada nang nagbabalita tungkol sa disaster sa probinsya.
Kapag bumalik na sila sa lupa nila, parang on their own na din sila. Kung meron man sila nakukuha, food packs. Kung yung mga ayuda, meron mga seedlings na binibigay sa kanila kapag magtatanim na ulit. Kasi, halimbawa, pagbalik nila, merong mga damage na ng ashfall, hindi na nila yun magagamit ulit or hindi na nila ma-harvest ulit. So, magtatanim sila ng panibago. Pero considered as paborable yun para sa pataba sa lupa.
Ano usually yung trabaho nitong mga evacuees na ito?
Mga farmers sila. Kasi itong mga nakatira talaga within the 6 km danger zone, hindi daw kasi talaga sila umaalis doon sa lugar kasi wala naman silang pupuntahan. Andun yung livelihood nila. And kung i-relocate man sila, sigurado daw, babalik at babalik sila kasi andun nga yung livelihood. Madalas daw, like doon sa Daraga, may relocation site nga, pero paglipat nila, wala naman silang trabaho. Wala naman silang pagkakakitaan. Buti daw yung mga bata-bata pa, pwede pa mag-apply sa mga pero itong mga farmers na sobrang tatanda na, wala naman na chance na ma-employ pa sa labas. Kaya sabi nila, parang sanay naman sila na from time to time mag-evacuate kapag nag-aalburuto. Tapos may normal days naman daw kasi si Mayon. So back to normal din sila sa Mayon. Parang sanay na din sila. Pero syempre, takot din sila sa danger.
Doc Bong also says, of course, that the more resources, the better. The bottom line, they say, is the better government can assure people of the safety and health of their animals, the more cooperative and taken care of the people will be themselves.
Supplies, equipment such as appropriate vehicles, adequate number of vehicles and manpower na well-trained, well-conditioned yung mga equipments, vehicles, yung mga tao is prepared, well-trained, fully aware of what is needed to do in case of the emergency. Tapos, since especially if we are dealing with livestock, bakit ba nag-aalaga ang farmer ng livestock. Primarily para yan sa kita, sa profit. Negosyo kasi yan eh. It's either a big profit or kahit sabi mo na for personal consumption. Kaya medyo nahihirapan yung mga responders na mag-evacuate ng ilang tao kasi nga hindi nila maiwanan yung mga alaga nila. So if we have natin insurance, it would be one, insurance for livestock. Pangalawa, if the government has enough budget para sa emergency purchase of these animals para hindi na alalahanin ng may-ari na, ay, sayang naman yung investment ko. If we can do emergency purchase of these livestock animals na pwede naman ding ng pagkabili, pwede na natin ikatay, kasi kung fit naman sila for human consumption, so walang panghinayangan.
Naririnig ko po yung kailangan ng manpower. Do we have enough veterinarians to suit the needs of our countrymen?
Honestly, hindi. Ang license number ng veterinaryo nasa 11 pa lang, 11,000 pa lang. So, ang may active licenses according sa data ng Philippine Veterinary Medical Association is just around 7,500. So, imagine yung 7,500 na licensed veterinarians divided mo sa buong Pilipinas, kulang siya. Kasi kung tutuusin, lalabas na isang veterinaryo kada roughly isang island.
Kaya to address yung kakulangan sa bilang ng veterinaryo, we closely coordinate with other allied professions, lalo na yung mga nasa field ng animal or livestock industry, such as yung mga animal husbandry graduates, mga ganun. We have livestock technicians.
It would take more than local governments, they say, and it will take even more than the national government.
Less na yung isang munisipyo, kahit may isa lang siyang veterinaryo na may veterinary office with ample supplies. Kasi hindi lang naman sa opisina mag-isa lang niya, mayroon siyang staff. These are yung mga livestock technicians, mga animal technicians, na kung sakali sila ay iti-train din natin, matuturuan natin para alam nila yung gagawin. Dagdag din sila sa responders. Of course, yung mga animal welfare groups, again, and other private organizations na wala man silang siguro sapat din na number of veterinarians if they do have veterinarians in their group, pero they were able to train their members and they will provide augmentation support in any disaster response activities. Kahit paano, lahat nga naman ay nakukuha sa pagtutulong-tulungan.
Speaking of pagtutulong-tulungan, may nakausap rin tayong isang resource person mula sa NGO.
Ako po si Dom Ibera. Ako po ang Deputy Executive Director ng Citizens Disaster Response Center.
Dom says it also comes back to not just government, but to communities themselves, the very people who need to be protected.
So we believe that disaster management should be community-based dahil lagit-lagi ang first responders ay ang mga tao sa community. Hindi ang LGU, hindi ang mga NGO, kundi ang mga kapitbahay natin. Tayo mismo ang tutulong sa mga kapitbahay nating makaigpaw sa kalamidad.
Kung resources ang pag-uusapan, para kay Dom ang pinakamahalagang resource ay ang komunidad mismo.
Kailangan organized ang community. Nagkakaisa sila. Alam nila kung ano yung mga sakuna na dumadating sa kanila. Alam nila na kailangan kumilos sila ng sama-sama para maging successful yung plano nila. importante rin na yung kanilang partnership with other agencies, NGOs, other groups like women or LGBT or PWD sectors. And syempre, laging kadikit ang LGU. So aside doon, kailangan talaga ang community is well represented sa mga barangay disaster risk reduction councils. Kasi, kunyari, sa barangay or sa munisipyo, minsan, dahil hindi naman talaga sila bumababa sa community, nagbibigay ng ayuda o kaya nagbibigay lang sila ng, ito ang gawin nyo. Pero hindi talaga nila alam yung sitwasyon ng community.
CDRC has a whole system through which they make communities better equipped to deal with disasters. Nagsisimula ito sa pagtuturo tungkol sa mga kalamidad. From why the Philippines is so disaster-prone, to what the laws around DRRM are, to what community-based disaster management is. Then, they create maps together. Hindi lang kung nasaan ang hazards at nasaan ang mga bahay relative to these hazards, pero pati na rin kung nasaan ang resources na pwede nilang asahan tuwing may sakuna. Halimbawa, andito ang bahay ni Mang X na mataas at gawa sa bato. Pwede dong lumikas. Andyan ang bahay ni Doktora Y na pwedeng puntahan para sa medical aid. Andon ang bahay ni Engineer Z na may truck na pwedeng hiramin para mag-rescue kung may baha.
And then, once they see all of that, makakita na sila na, okay, how can we prevent the loss of lives? And then, dun na sila magpaplano. So, dun na kami magtuturo on how to plan the disaster preparedness plan, community disaster action plan. At dun sa CDAP na yon, kasama na dun yung paano sila mag-evacuate on baha. So, kung meron silang enough space or enough time to plan or to evacuate, ano-ano yung mga dadalhin nila. Tapos, sino-sino mga uunahin nila. Usually, ang inuuna nila dyan yung mga vulnerable na individuals like persons with disabilities, mga senior citizen, mga ganyan. Tapos, pagkatapos nun, tsaka na sila yung mag-evacuate. It's easier to bounce back kung hindi ganun kalaki ang effect ng disaster sa'yo. So, what happens is, para hindi ganun kalaki ang effect ng disaster sa'yo, dapat maging prepared yung community.
In the final episode of Alagang Handa, we'll learn more about why prevention is better than cure. We're heading to Cavite to look at a system of farming that makes animals and crops more resilient to natural hazards. Again, I'm Trisha Aquino, the writer and producer of this episode. This episode was edited by Mark Casilian. Research from Paul Soriano. The script was edited by Robbie Alampay. Jill Caro is the executive producer. You've been listening to Teka Teka News. Again, Alagang Handa is produced with support from Internews' Earth Journalism Network. Kung bitin pa kayo sa episode ngayon, basahin ang quote, Meet Cedric Daep, Albay's Mr. Disaster, and quote, isang article ni April Meyer Manjares sa Inquirer.net.